Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session entitled Which Impact Assessments for AI Beyond Data Protection? I'm Tom Reynolds, Chief Economist at the UK Data Protection Authority, the ICO, and I'll be moderating the session this afternoon on behalf of the Commission Nationale de l'Informatique et des Libertés, the CNIL, who we're all very grateful to for organising things for us. So the subject of our session is the role of impact assessments in the context of artificial intelligence. We all know that AI has huge potential to do good, but at the same time, it raises risks for individuals and for society. And we're seeing new legislation, most obviously, of course, the EU's AI Act, that and the balance that they seek to strike between promoting human-centric and trustworthy AI, protecting fundamental rights, and supporting innovation. So, given these objectives, how do we ensure that the benefits of this technology outweigh the costs, that the risks can be controlled, the harms avoided, and that people can trust AI to deliver on its great potential? Well, our answer in this session, I think, is that impact assessment has a critical role to play here. We've already seen impact assessments as part of the legislative process, and it's a well-recognised part of the toolkit of economists and regulators more generally. It can also be, of course, a requirement of regulation. As suggested in the session title, we have data protection impact assessments already. So what lessons can we learn from these experiences and apply when considering fundamental rights impact assessments, for example, in the context of AI? So, to answer these and other questions, I'm sure, I'm delighted to introduce a distinguished and diverse panel for you this afternoon. So, going down the line, we have next to me Charlotte Barrault from the AI unit of the CNIL, our organisers this afternoon. Next we have Sabri Shkiri, Chief Technology Officer of Euronova, a consulting and research company dedicated to data science and AI. Next we have Axel Cazier, a student at Sciences Po in Paris and representing Encode Justice, which is the world's first and largest youth movement for safe and equitable AI. And then finally, on the end, Andrea Renda, who's Director of Research at the Centre for European Policy Studies and lead author of its study to support the impact assessment for the EU's AI Act. And I should add also an adjunct professor of digital policy at the School of Transnational Governance of the European University Institute in Florence. I think I got that right. So we're going to structure our discussion this afternoon in two rounds, starting with a higher level discussion of impact assessment, the objectives of AI regulation, and what some of these sort of existing experiences can tell us. And then in a second round, we'll move deeper into what the application of impact assessments means for AI systems in practice, what their scope should be, when and by whom, for example, they should be completed, and we'll have time for questions from the floor as well. So let's get into things, and to set the scene for this discussion, I'll first explain from a wider sort of economic and regulatory perspective a little about what impact assessment is, how it's used, its aims, and some of the challenges that we can encounter. So, at its simplest, impact assessment is a means of providing objective, transparent, evidence-based analysis to support decision-making. As already mentioned, it can be part of the legislative process, so the development of the AI Act being a prime example. It can be used in the practice of regulation, such as the regulatory impact assessments that the ICO produces, for example. And they're both where it can be used as part of the policy making cycle. Or it can be a let me move the mic a little closer. Is that better? Of course. Thank you. I was saying impact assessment can also be a regulatory requirement on organisations, such as the DPIAs that we have as an accountability requirement under GDPR, and the fundamental rights impact assessments that we foresee under the AI Act. So in general, we can think about impact assessment as a framework for identifying the effects of some action. And the way that I normally explain this to people is that we always start by casting the net as wide as we possibly can. So thinking about all types of impact. So that can be positive and negative impacts, and impacts as well on all relevant groups, all relevant actors. Try to take them all into account. And then in the regulatory context, at least, we then, to the extent that is possible, quantify these effects in cost-benefit analysis. So in doing this, we see some common challenges and issues, which I think are very relevant in the case of AI. So first, uncertainty. Impact assessment is, by its very nature, a forward-looking exercise. So some uncertainty is inevitable. But clearly, in the case of AI, this is going to be an acute issue. We know that AI is a general purpose technology. It can be applied in so many different use cases, and it's complex to understand. It's a disruptive technology that we don't know how exactly it might be used, and at the same time, of course, it's also developing very rapidly. So this makes the analysis more complicated. Means that case by case work is needed. Second, I think we need to think about costs and benefits. Costs are, in impact assessment, often relatively easier to identify than the benefits, which is not to say easy, but relatively easier. Costs typically fall on a relatively small group of organisations that have the ability and have good incentives to articulate and evidence their case. Whereas in contrast, the benefits, which can be risks and harms that can be avoided, well, they're often diffuse. They're often spread very thinly across many individuals, or perhaps the whole of society. So it makes things harder. Third, I'd say we need to think about proportionality. So impact assessment, as I said, involves thinking about costs and benefits, but this process itself has costs and benefits to it as well. So we need to be proportionate in our efforts, which can be difficult to judge. Fourth, I'd say we also need to be mindful not to jump straight to the numbers. I think it can be tempting when doing impact assessment work to look straight at what can be quantified and seek to draw conclusions from that. However, what we find is that it's entirely normal for some impacts, often benefits, to be unquantified. So we need to account for the qualitative as well as the quantitative when we're thinking about these things. And then fifth and finally, I'd say that much of the value of an impact assessment is as much in the process as it is in the results. So it's a framework. It provides a structure for rigorous thinking and an opportunity to identify and to fix problems, potentially before they arise. So often the journey, that we go on in an impact assessment can be as important as the destination. So with that in mind, let's perhaps embark on our own journey with our panel here this afternoon. And first, I'd like to invite Andrea to reflect on his experience of producing or supporting the impact assessment for the AI Act. Andrea.
Thank you very much, Tom, and apologies to everybody because I'm the reason why the panel started a little bit late. I had a little bit of a problem in the metro. The train got stuck for like 15 minutes. And so here I am. Impact assessments, for me, I mean, it's been quite an adventure to go through and assist the European Commission in the impact assessment of the AI Act. For once, I didn't have the imposter syndrome because I was coming from the experience of being a member of the high-level expert group on AI. We had laid the foundations for the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, which then became the white paper on AI at EU level in 2020. So we're in the run-up to what then became the proposed AI Act in April 2021 by the European Commission. I was actually well positioned. I knew what the process had led to. I also didn't have an imposter syndrome because I had written in the past the cost-benefit analysis handbook that the European Commission is using to do impact assessments. So it was really at the crossroads of what I've done in my academic career and in my professional career, but this doesn't mean it was easy. I sat down with the European Commission and started asking questions. We were at the end of a consultation on the white paper. So broadly, we knew what stakeholders thought would be a sensible way of progressing. But we didn't really have a precise view of what the policy problem would be, which is typically the starting point of an impact assessment. We didn't know exactly what the regulatory options or the policy options, what we call the alternative policy options, would be. And what would be the content of these policy options in terms of concrete regulatory requirements, right? So good luck doing a cost-benefit analysis of all this, because on top of this, as you can imagine, we didn't have a lot of certainty about how the impact assessment, how the AI market would evolve in the future. So the European Commission was sort of tentatively saying that they thought risky AI applications, at the time the European Commission had in mind a sort of a dichotomy, high risk or no risk, but that in identifying the applications that could be considered to be riskier, what we caught in that net would be around approximately 5 to 10% of the AI systems in the market. We would not know what 100% would be. We would not know how to define risk very well, and so we needed to move forward. So despite the fact that I had no, I was in my own element, it was very complicated, and this is where you have to be, and this is different from what we normally see in impact assessments. And I, believe me, I've done many at the EU level and at the global level. Here, you have to be as evidence-informed as you have to be foresight-informed. So you have to look, and this is what I, with my team, we did for the European Commission. We looked at the emerging evidence, even if in some cases it was not consolidated evidence, that AI could affect specific impacts, and in particular fundamental rights and safety. These are the two things that the European Commission had in the radar. And in some cases, we found some concrete evidence already from the United States in particular, where algorithms were already quite widespread, and emerging evidence in a couple of member states. Plus, we found evidence that the member states were launching their AI strategies in many cases with different directions and scopes. Well, we didn't know much about what the options would be and how to move forward. So what we had to do is engage in a conversation with the European Commission about what potential options could be laid down. This also led, among other things, the European Commission to imagine this 4-tier classification of risks. So the fact that in some cases, if we don't have knowledge of the mitigating measures, or we don't know of sufficient mitigating measures for a specifically risky or particularly risky AI application, perhaps we shouldn't allow that application. So it's not just high risk or no risk. There should be a too risky or unacceptable risk category. And perhaps there should be some specific types of risks that could be targeted in a slightly different way than the high-risk ones. And this is what you find as sort of limited risk applications that are typically the ones where the user has no obvious knowledge or awareness of whether the interlocutor is human or not. This is what eventually triggered what I call the revenge CAPTCHA, or the fact that finally on the internet, it is the robot that has to tell us I'm not a human rather than the other way around, right? So how we progressed on this, we created a number of incremental policy options for a sort of more or less fair type of option, to a proportionate risk-based option where only the high risk or limited risk would be identified, to an extreme option which is regulating everything, right? And then we started looking into the potential regulatory requirements, which came from the work of the high-level expert group on AI. And for some, the only real anchor that I had at the time was the fact that the European Commission had declared that they wanted to nest the work and the scope of the Artificial Intelligence Act in the product safety legislation at the EU level. So what I did as something, well, I'm almost embarrassed, but this is how economists sometimes become creative. I took a standardized set of activities that correspond to specific tasks that are performed normally by companies, especially when they do conformity assessments. I called 2 workshops with experts and asked them to reconstruct a process of compliance with the future potential AI Act. And we almost timed, like we do in a technique called the standard cost model, but the tables were coming from the German government originally. We timed different activities, and we associated a cost to each and every activity that has to be put together in order to end up complying with specific regulatory requirements. And this is where we built a sort of an idealized version of a compliance process, and then we extrapolated it to what was our understanding, and also from the gray literature in particular, the understanding of how the AI market could evolve in the future, and what would be the population of high-risk AI systems, or this 5 to 10% of total AI systems that would then be subject to the regulatory requirements. So this is how we sort of extrapolated this cost and created a first sort of super guesstimated figure for costs. For benefits, we didn't really went into the quantification. It was not in our mandate. And this is also typically, and as I wrap up, I'm happy to take questions, the way in which the European Commission carries out impact assessments. Very rarely, I would say, there is a complete benefit cost analysis which results in what in economics we would call the net present value. And so you pick the option with the highest net benefits, let's say, going forward. What you do normally with what you call multi-criteria analysis, so you try to quantify the cost, but also you see which option is likely to most proportionately achieve the objectives that you've set at the very beginning. And the objectives here were increasing trust in artificial intelligence, promoting innovation, protecting users' fundamental rights, and increasing safety, and, as always, needless to say, ça va sans dire, protecting the single market. Now, a little window into the future in case you have questions. This was just the beginning, of course. It was what triggered a decision on a proposal that was presented in April 2021. We discovered so many other things along the way, and we ended up a few days ago approving a final text of the AI Act that I would say is for 75 to 80%, with another guesstimate, different and new compared to the original approach and the original proposal that we had on the table when we did the first impact assessment. So this raises a question of what is the prospective impact and what is the evidence-based nature of this piece of legislation if most of the very far-reaching innovations that have been brought in, especially during the trilogue in the last days of the negotiation, have not been subject to any consultation with experts or any attempt to quantify or assess the impacts. We'll see with time. But for now, I'll stop and hand over to you, Tom.
That's lovely, thank you. So that's about the application of impact assessments as part of the legislative process. We'll turn now perhaps to Charlotte for the regulator's point of view on this, and in particular, I suppose, interested in how's the CNIL thinking about these issues in preparation for the implementation of the AI Act and your approach to that.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So first of all, of course, the regulator wants to first detect and second minimize the risks. This is obvious, right? But for impact analysis, this approach is a bit too narrow when it comes to AI. As you mentioned, of course, there is a kind of a collinearity between benefits and risks. And a benefit in one area can entail a risk in one another. We have this very old tension between security of the groups and freedom of individuals. This is even more true, this notion of collinearity, when we vary the scale of the group of people we are seeking to protect. We have to take account of the scale. This entails that we require a new approach. We require to pay attention to the key factors that allow us to strike the right balance between risks and benefits, taking into account the sector, but also the horizontal assessment of the risks, as Andrea mentioned. And this aligns us with a more economical approach than we were in the past. And thus, I would like to stress the fact that AI Act does not provide all the answers for open scientific technological problems, such that, for example, interpretability of neural networks. These questions are very deep and very complex, and we do not pretend to have solved them with one text. So it entails that we have to be very adaptive, we have to be future-proof and consistent with previous legislation, taking into account this very fast evolution of technology. So to go back to the strategy of the data protection authorities, at least the French one that I represent, so I would say that we have mostly three ways to manage impact, three complementary strategies. The first one is to measure, to audit, to assess the risks. The second one is to simplify, to harmonize the legal frameworks, to give legal certainty. And the third one is to experiment, to have evidence-based legislation. So the first aspect to audit, so let us remind that we want to think of the risk in a holistic manner, and we know that positive impact is linked to performance of the system. So finally, what we want to know, we want to be sure that the system that will be deployed on the market will do exactly what it is supposed to, and not no other things. So we want to foster this trust for the user, but also for the market, because when I reuse some model, when I reuse some technology, I want to be sure that this is trustable. So we have to pay a very particular attention to performance and quality of the tools. And this means to have an expertise on audit systems. To measure this quality, AI calls for an across-the-bound risk metric, and we know this. So to enhance our expertise, we have set up a team that is devoted to auditing AI system algorithms. We really need it to understand what could be problematic with the deployment of such systems, and what are the risks of biases, loss of performance, etc. I said that we want also to provide some guidance to simplify the compliance, to harmonize the legal frameworks that we have. And this is matching with the notion of seeking for risk metrics. At the level of the European Standardization Group, we are in permanent dialogue with industry to try to extract suitable norms, suitable operational norms for the industry from the requirements, notably for quality and management system, risk management system, robustness, explainability, human oversight. This is a very permanent and very dynamic dialogue because these standards have to be robust over time and over the different needs of the different sectors. Moreover, this challenge of harmonized rules and standards, we pursue it at the level of the Assembly of European Data Protection Authorities. We have a group that is devoted to interplay GDPR guidelines with AI Act requirements. And we are lead reviewer on this work. This is very important because legal security can only come from this articulation, because the costs of compliance of GDPR has led the ecosystem to a kind of worries when it comes to the new legislation. So we really want to support these stakeholders. We want to be there, and we want to be there in an experimental way. We want to know what are the exact effects of developing a system, and we want to be able to you were talking, Tom, about quantitative versus qualitative measures, and I think with this experimentation, we come to a bit qualitative way to understand what are the factors. It's very difficult to quantitative measure them, but at least we can understand them a bit. So to foster this trust, for several years we have been supporting stakeholders in very various and sometimes very sensitive sectors, such as health, for the development of diagnosis aid algorithms, medical imagery, but also tax administration for algorithm targeting fraud, human resources also. So we were really on this journey way before the AI Act. And finally, this experimentation couldn't be if we didn't allow the stakeholders to try some things without the worry of a sanction. So we had decided to launch AI sandboxes in the spirit of the AI Act. We support the stakeholders on very innovative use case, notably a French public LLM, Albert, that some of you may know, that is meant to be deployed to the benefit of public services. And all these experiments, these in situ conditions, allow us to raise really new questions, such that, for example, open source, fine-tuning, model reuse, etc. So finally, we really want to match the need for consistent analytic metrics with the notion of the construction, the conception, to take the time, to let the time to the stakeholder to understand experimentally what are the results of the deployment.
That's excellent, thank you. Let's perhaps turn now to Axel. Could you perhaps tell us about consideration of the final users' views in this, and what are the expectations from a civil society point of view?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Tom. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Tom, thank Emeric and CNIL for inviting OncoJustice to take part of this conversation, because I think it's so important to be including the young generation into the type of discussion, to question, to listen, and to together push the boundaries of our understanding of AI, so thank you. I will be talking from OncoJustice, so in a more human-centered approach. That being said, we've seen how social media has impacted truly our generation, has become a tool of instrumentalization, in which algorithms are designed to make us addicted. So it's important for us to not have a similar slow regulation process for AI. In fact, AI is already acting as a machine propaganda. In a quick example, I could cite last year's, during Slovakia's parliamentary election, a fake audio exposed the major party's leaders' plan to buy votes. This fake audio spread like wildfires, and this leads to abuse of the good functioning. These types of abuses, lead to altercation on the good functioning of the society. So that's why we need to actively push the boundaries of AI regulation. So for us at OncoJustice, there are two types of risks. First, the technical risk and what we call ESG risks. So technical risks includes cybersecurity, representative data sets. We can say many other things, biases in the data. And then, but however, a system can have zero technical risks, but still have a huge impact on the social part, and that's what we call ESG risks. So the impact on the individuals concerning health, security, the impact on the society concerning data biases that can lead to discrimination, and finally, impact on environment concerning energy consumption. Those type of ESG risks are much less difficult to. They are much more difficult to predict and much more difficult to quantify. However, they are equally important and relevant to consider. So, Tom, to answer to your question, the civil society expects and calls for a more human-centered approach on AI regulation. So we have seen that the experts who drafted the EU AI Act based and categorized the risks under the Human Rights Charter, implementing what they call the fundamental rights impact and conformity assessments. And at Oncojustice, we believe that this act is revolutionary, and it will be contribute to a structured legal framework. However, gray zones still remain, such as the exclusion of defense matters, the omission of rights and obligations on the use of personal image, and finally, there are a lot of regulations about the deployers, the developers, and of those systems, but not much on the end users. So that must be considered. So overall, the civil society calls for a more risk-robust management strategies, and also, I would say, impact assessment and accountability measures for AI regulation. I decided to categorize this under two types of expectations. So first and foremost, the expectation of more transparency and better control. And second, an expectation for a global framework, as Charlotte said earlier. So to obtain a more transparent and better control system, we can do that through efficient oversight. And as we've seen, better management control and accountability among the corporations. With structured governance, to audit AI products and manage risks, but at the same time also creating laws that clearly define the liabilities on the misuse of AI from the corporation and the end user. Second, on the request for the expectation of more global framework, right now the Human Rights acts as our current global framework, but it is so important and imperative to think about developing an international universal agreement on AI. We know that the impact can differ from one jurisdiction to another. However, it is crucial that we think beyond the borders because we know that AI operates beyond borders. So to conclude, Tom, I think the line between truth and deception and real and artificial will blur. So that's why it's imperative to be talking about AI regulation and to push forward to innovate in order to think about those systems. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Sabri, can we turn to you, please? And perhaps you could explain some of the concerns, but also the expectations of businesses in meeting these new obligations.
Sure. Well, that's a tough word because at the end of the day, we need to implement something and make it compliant. And I think in that perspective, we have three main concerns. The first one is that we always hear that we need to have a risk-based approach. That's okay, and I think everybody agree on that, but the problem will be how to measure that risk. Shall I use just a questionnaire? There is plenty of way to answer some questions, but if you answer to the question, is my model fair? If I answer yes, I think so, is it okay? Is it enough? And that's why having some metrics makes sense. And data science and AI today give us a lot of different metrics that help you to profile the behavior of a model. It could be on, of course, accuracy, it could be on fairness, it could be on explainability, it could be on the robustness against security, against uncertainty in terms of data, in terms of change of distribution. You have a lot of ways to analyze a model. And our conclusion is that, well, if you do that correctly, you can map almost 70% of the requirement of the AI Act in terms of risk scoring by just reusing these data science metrics. But then we need to agree on, okay, is it something, let's say, valid from a legal point of view? Is it recognized? And this is where this standardization effort makes a lot of sense. And of course, we cannot measure everything. Things like the non-measurable risk that Axel was mentioning are clearly out of scope, but at least we can focus on the model behavior as a qualitative risk estimate. The second thing that we need is an AI governance, because as soon as you have these metrics, you still need to define, well, who will create these metrics, who will validate, who will measure, who will take the outcome of this matrix to take a decision, who will be accountable for that. And this is where you need to have role, responsibilities, processes, and organization, which is a typical definition of a governance, but applied to AI models. This is also where you can define an ethical committees and which kind of mandate you will give to them. Because that's something today not really a strong requirement from the law, but you can still, from a responsible AI point of view, still decide to put that in place. And the final point is about the legal jungle. Today, it's not only the AI Act or not only the GDPR. You have all the new coming regulation. You have the Data Act, Data Governance Act, the former e-privacy, the NIS directive. So all those things need to be taken into account. And when you start a new business case, the first thing you need to do is to define under which regulation you are falling under. And then what will be the impact in terms of governance and compliance during your life cycle for the AI model. And this is where the complexity arrives, because that's not so simple. You have to have a really good understanding of the technology, a really good understanding of the law and the constraint, and to mix it together into your governance process. And I think here we need still more clearer guidance.
Thank you very much. And I think perhaps those comments lead us naturally into some more detailed consideration of the requirements anticipated under the AI Act. So Article 27 of the sort of recently approved text there requires the deployer of a high-risk AI system to conduct this fundamental rights impact assessment that's been mentioned before deployment in that use. Now, one sort of feature, and we've had hints of this, I think, already, but one feature that strikes me as quite interesting about this is that this assessment is quite focused on risks and their mitigation rather than necessarily the sort of balancing test that I was describing earlier between costs and benefits or risks and benefits. And so this is perhaps a difference compared to impact assessments in the sort of legislative and regulatory settings that we heard about earlier, or indeed a difference as well to data protection impact assessments. So, for example, the ICO's guidance on DPIAs explains that the exercise isn't about eliminating all risk. It's about minimizing risk and determining whether the sort of level of residual risk, the risk that's left, is acceptable in the circumstances. So bearing in mind, the benefits of, the sort of use and what you want to achieve. So I think there's an interesting question there about the extent to which this is a sort of conventional economic approach, where benefits can and should also be taken into account. Another thing, and perhaps another lesson that we can take from conducting regulatory impact assessments in the data protection context is the difficulties that we have in identifying, articulating, and particularly, as we've already heard, quantifying risks and harms to rights. And so this is an area in which the ICO has conducted sort of research previously and published, for example, a taxonomy of data protection harms in a similar way to how now taxonomies of AI harms are being produced. So if we think about some of the issues, bias has been mentioned, or discrimination, these are challenging issues to grapple with, I think, for a number of reasons that we see in the data protection context and that are also relevant to AI. So these are issues that are, by their nature, intangible. They're difficult to identify, difficult to quantify, might not even be apparent, to those people who are affected by them. They're also probabilistic. They may or may not, arise. They may or may not occur, and they're intertemporal as well. An action today, action might be taken today, but the harm not emerge, not be realised until some unspecified point in the future. They can also be diffuse, as I mentioned earlier. So the harm, perhaps to any individual might be small. But when those individual harms are aggregated up across many individuals, or perhaps across the whole of society, they could be much more significant. And those individual harms as well will vary. What might harm me need not necessarily harm you, or vice versa. And finally, I think it can be difficult to avoid harms, particularly if applications of AI are ubiquitous. It could be difficult to avoid. Even before we get to the sort of economist normal concerns about sort of market power and difficulties in switching perhaps between different providers. So to open up this more detailed discussion, this time perhaps turn to Charlotte first to expand on the regulator's point of view. Clearly, data protection authorities have experience of both, impact assessments in DPIAs and regulating AI. So perhaps you could tell us about what examples and lessons we might be able to take from that experience.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Tom. So as you very well explained, the Article 27 provides some useful guidance on the content that is expected from impact analysis in AI high-risk systems. But the exact scope is not very well defined because it's very difficult when it comes to AI to have a generic case, even if we are seeking for horizontal elements, because it's too broad, it includes too much cases, so it could be difficult to understand what should be expected exactly from this analysis. What we know for sure is that it should include, actually should include GDPR DPAI, so impact analysis from GDPR, which already happily go beyond privacy, data privacy, and confidentiality threats. The scope of GDPR impact assessment, Article 35, is used as a safeguard that, first of all, the processing will respect the rights and freedom of individuals, including holistic threats, such as discrimination. This is perfectly in line with AI Act impact assessment that which purposes to document the specific risks of harms on categories of people, democracy threats, data privacy threats also, and especially when they meet. This is here that we raise the measures, the operational measures such as transparency, robustness, biases, record logging, human oversight measures. This is exactly in this spirit that the CNIL audited, pre-audited the smart camera suppliers for the Olympic Games in Paris. So we have to ensure that this surveillance that is necessary actually would respect the rights of individuals, that won't be face recognition, for example, detection of emotion, neither, etc. There is a second crucial aspect that is meant to be included in impact assessment in GDPR. That is Article 22, actually, which requires crucially that decisions having an impact, a significant impact on individual lives, should not be fully automated. That is meant to preserve human sovereignty over important decisions, and this provides a legal framework to consider the notion of human oversight. That is the notion, AI Act notion, actually, the Article 14. This is very important since there are a lot of decision support systems that are deployed, and actually this is one of the main uses of AI systems, is to help to decide, to produce estimation. So this is a very key aspect for acceptance, social acceptance, confidence, also trust of the user. This promotes more explainable systems. This ensures robustness over outliers. So this allows us to think a bit more about how to implement this measure. We are actually in dialogue with our counterparts, the European counterparts, so their data protection authorities, to precise the guideline of the G29 over what is required of a human intervention, what is a significant human oversight. How could we define them according to the different use cases? So back to proper AI impact assessment, we think that mostly it should include two aspects. So as you mentioned, there is a very important governance aspect. And let us remind that AI Act is technologically agnostic. So this means that risks in AI Act are defined according to a context of use. We do not here target any technology per se. We do not forbid any technology according to the AI Act. So the first aspect is linked to the purpose, to the intended use of the system. So what do we expect, what should we expect from someone that would have the system, and how will this person use the system? So the documentation of risks, notably for privacy and democracy, such, for example, mass surveillance, which are very important and holistic threats for society, for which data protection authorities are already competent, should be included in such analysis. And this is here where we have to put the potential benefits, because it has to be balanced with the purpose. This second aspect is more operational. This is linked to what we could call the unintended use, the adverse effects of the systems. These measures are to ensure the good functioning of the system that will be deployed. This is what we could call the safeguards, such accuracy, robustness, potential biases, human oversight, and transparency. And importantly, from the AI Act, you have to think these safeguards from the design stage. So the deployer is the first one that have to think about these kind of measures, but they descend along the production chain. So to conclude, I would say that what really matters here is to clearly distinguish the risk related to unintended use, to the performance and the quality, linked to audit, to measure of risks, and also to have a more holistic point of view about the intended uses. And there you have to strike the balance between risks and benefits.
Lovely, thank you. And Sabri, let's move along the line, and perhaps you could tell us, I know you've done a lot of thinking already about impact as part of AI governance. Where do these processes, do you think, fit into the value chain and also the data life cycle?
Well, I can answer the question if we take back the typical life cycle of an AI model. So usually we start by what we call business understanding. This is where you are going to describe the business case, the context, the purpose, and then having a first kind of classification of risk according to the risk category of the AI Act. This is also where you are going to define the accountabilities. You are going to define which are the different parties engaged and what are the accountability for each of them. They are accountable for what exactly? The second step is usually what we call data understanding. You are going to find what are the different data sets that are used for your business case. And this is where data governance is super useful there, because it will help finding the different data sets, but also defining the different data policies attached to each data. And then defining what will be the different regulations that apply specifically on these data sets. And this is where you can establish what we call a legal check and defining what will be the different constraints for processing these data. This is typically where you will decide that, okay, if I don't have the right purpose to process the data, I need to anonymize them, but, well, at which level of risk? And this is where you are going to take some decision for being compliant for the processing. The next step is the data preparation. This is where you massage the data before the modeling of the algorithm. This is typically where data governance will play a role again here in terms of data quality. You will define whether the data are good quality or enough, let's say, for processing the data. This is where you can have a first check in terms of fairness. Do the data I have are covering or are representing correctly my population, and what are the weak variables I have in my data set? And how can I correct it if I find something really wrong? And of course, in terms of auditability, this is where you are going to register your processing to the ROPA, the Register of Processing Activities, to be sure that your processing is tracked. And then the next phase is the modeling itself. The modeling is where you build, you design the AI model. There you could do a lot of things in terms of security, defining what will be the kind of attack scheme your model could be exposed to, what will be the mitigation methods. You could also define what will be the sensitivity to uncertainty for your model. If your model is deployed in production and if he sees something that he has never seen before during the training, what will be the behavior of your model? Can you train the model to be robust on these kind of things? These are crucial questions when you design the model. And this is where, in terms of safety, you will also define the edge case. What will be the adverse situation where your model could be a threat? And what will be the mitigation method to safeguarding the production? And this is where you go in validation. This is where you can validate that your model is indeed robust to change of data, robust in terms of security and attacks, that he is explainable in terms of transparency, or not at all, and what will be the different mitigation method you could put in place. And also, this is where you are ready to have a first kind of risk assessment, according to all the measures you have taken during the life cycle. And the last step is deploying in production, and this is where you will define what will be the role of the human oversight and what will be the different KPI you are going to measure in production. Having all those things allows you to, well, measure at least a risk sensitivity. But let's say that all these metrics could have, let's say, some tension in between each of them. Let me take an example. If you take privacy and fairness, they can be completely opposite. So if I decide to encrypt my data using a privacy-enhancing technology, I lose all the information about the weak variable. So I can be completely unfair. So I will be highly private compliant, but I will be really unfair. And the same happens with security and accuracy, with robustness versus fairness. There is many different tension. And your risk sensitivity should take into account the different trade-off you choose during the design of your model. And this makes the things even more tricky.
Thank you very much. And Axel, what's perhaps the role of users when we get to these more detailed applications, and how are we going to build the trust that's necessary to drive adoption of new technologies?
Yes, thank you, Tom. So to explain a bit what Oncojustice does, we are the largest global youth network advocating for a more human-centered approach of AI. So it means 3 different things. First, we want to encourage diverse stakeholder involvement. In fact, we believe that involving AI should be governed and built for and by diverse stakeholders. Second, we want to enhance human potential. So instead of replacing human capabilities, we want to be able to, and we believe that investment towards innovative AI, towards personalized education and medicine could be a great way to, for creativeness, to enhance connectedness between people. And thirdly, we want to encourage for a more equitable distribution of AI because we don't want any groups to be marginalized or be left behind. So at Oncojustice, our main objective is to educate as many people as we can into the risks and benefits of AI, and also how to navigate the rapid changes of those technologies in order so that the systems are built taking every stakeholder's interests in mind. And from the workshops that we've conducted from thousands and hundreds of high schools around the world, we're surprised to see quite a lot of fear from the young population. So the question is, how can you earn trust? And we believe at Oncojustice that transparency and accessibility are tools that can enhance the trust among this population. So first, transparency. When impact assessment is made, information should be disclosed to the public so that the population is informed. In fact, if impact assessment is assessing society as a stakeholder, then the society should be able to read them. We also, in terms of transparency, we also believe that open source AI can be a great way to include independent users to be developing, improving, and assessing the reliability of the systems. But however, on the second side, so accessibility side, the release of documentation is not enough if they're not understandable or readable. So this involves translating the documents in as many languages as you can, and also make it understandable, so simplifying the technical terms of AI in order to make an AI literate population. And finally, to finish, I think that focus groups can be of great help to enhance explainability, especially when when they test certain systems that can improve the ability to notice and to detect biases and to improve the systems, therefore.
Thank you. And finally, Andrea, perhaps bearing in mind everything that we've heard, what would you say are the remaining challenges here, and well, perhaps what can we do about them as well?
Okay. So there's a myriad remaining challenges, right? The first thing I want to say is that we are talking about conspirators here, right? We are talking about non-mainstream stuff, fundamental rights, because the key buzzword in AI currently is safety, as not fundamental rights. And that is something that I think we should keep in mind quite clearly. Over the past couple of years, the debate at the global level, but in many countries around the world as well, has given a lot more space to the idea that AI might one day kill us all, than the fact that AI might, for example, affect fundamental rights such as freedom of expression or privacy. It's yesterday's news, the creation of the network of safety institutes around the world, US, UK, sorry, Tom, and Japan, Canada setting up one, Singapore having a safety institution, the EU being the only one who has a rather broader mandate, although in a legislation grounded partly on product safety, which is the EU AI office. My impression is that the key risk and the challenge that we have at the moment is to keep the fundamental rights in the radar, because I don't think it is something happening randomly that the debate is turning towards safety. I do believe that there's many people that have an interest in turning investment in AI towards so-called artificial general intelligence ventures, and less for example, AI for good or AI for sustainable development goals. You look at the data from last year, venture capital in AI has gone down last year, but venture capital on AGI has exploded. So there's a lot of talking about AI, the benefits of AI, AI for good, ITU and other initiatives, but this is not where the market is going. This is not where the attention of the end users is going. And when I heard Ursula von der Leyen last year in the State of the Union speech, dedicated basically 0 lines to fundamental rights, but at least 20, 30 seconds of her speech to the risk of human extinction from AI, that got me a little bit worried. And today, we are under election time. I think we are struggling between 2 types of narratives. One is a narrative that AI can kill us before climate change will, and the other one is that the Green Deal will kill us before climate change will. So we have to be wary of both. So second thing, that is a challenge. You can write a legislation that you claim is horizontal and comprehensive, such as the AI Act. It is not fully horizontal. It is not fully comprehensive, of course, for what I would say, but it is a relatively broad and cross-cutting piece of legislation. But it is inevitable that the implementation of the AI Act will have to go sector-specific and use case-specific. The more you dirty your hands with AI auditing, with the impact assessments, the more you realize that not only the specificity of the risks along the value chain changes across sectors and use case, but also that the mitigating measures are different. So you can have a very easy life saying these are the 4 regulatory requirements in the AI Act: data, transparency, human oversight, and so on. But in practice, this is going to mean many different things if you look at triage in hospitals as opposed to autonomous vehicles, just to name 2 of a myriad use cases. And so while certain countries around the world, and that includes to some extent the UK, but certainly the US as well, have started sector-specific, right, by having this, for example, the executive order in the United States mandating specific actions in the different federal agencies of the United States. So Department of Transport as opposed to Department of Education or Occupational Safety and Health Authority, and so on and so forth. And those are now going towards creating some glue between these sectoral measures. The ones that have started more horizontal, such as the EU, now through the EU AI office, I guess, will need to cooperate with the sectoral regulators to try and go deeper into what does it mean to ensure trustworthy AI when you have a high-risk use case in a specific sector and that has specific mitigating measures. We also realize that there is a specificity to value chains in AI. This is one of the things that I did during the ordinary legislative procedure, this bad word that is, between when the European Commission presented the proposal and when the final text of the AI Act was presented, was starting a series of papers that looked at in how many different ways AI reaches the market. And this was, I think, impactful in particular on the members of the European Parliament, because the original proposal of the AI Act was under the assumption that this is one type of AI model that creates one risk for one person. And indeed, that's not the case in most cases. The impacts and the way in which they materialize are diffuse, and the model that we see prevailing on the market at the moment is a model where someone develops an AI system that is kept under an application programming interface, and there's a myriad of users or ultimate mini deployers that take the functionalities of this GPT, for example, and tweak it to a specific use case, but they know nothing about the model object. So they would never be able to perform any conformity assessment of that model. The context in which they deliver the service helps them a little bit with the fundamental rights impact assessment. They can decide on human oversight and many other things, but they have no clue about the riskiness, the accuracy of the model, how it responds, or even how to monitor it over time. And this, as you've seen, has determined a sort of a schism in the evolution of the AI Act, where you now have these provisions that Charlotte was mentioning before, the ones that are implemented at the national level on high-risk AI system, but you also regulate the technology, meaning the general purpose AI systems have a dedicated implementation and enforcement centralized at the EU level with the AI Act, because there was an emerging awareness that there is little that you can do if you only focus on what you called at the beginning the providers, so the ones that place on the market the AI Act. In most cases, you're targeting the wrong people. They have no clue about the potential and the riskiness of these AI systems. What is remaining? There's a lot. I think if we, in the next mandate, will manage to put our hands on a proposal that was presented too late and never saw the light in this legislature, which is a proposal on liability for AI systems, we will be able to complete some of the gaps that still exists. There are some countries, I name, for example, Brazil, that have taken the AI Act, they added the liability measure, and they have, to some extent, built a potentially improved version of the AI Act, because there is a lot that we don't know about the specific liability and how to handle the liability of the various subjects that operate along the value chain of AI. More generally, as we move forward in the age of AI, of immersive AI, or say, of more pervasive AI, we will discover that there are some risks that the AI Act cannot cover, and they are perhaps the most important ones. The first I call the epistemic risks of AI. The risk, and Urs Gasser was here in the conference, he came to SAPS today, we had a discussion on his book, Guardrails, which is largely about this, the fact that we might gradually lose agency on the operation of AI, the more we delegate to AI decisions and processes that we can hardly follow. And that is very important in the age of high-frequency transactions, of interactions between AI systems, where these systems might progress, not developing intelligence, but developing actions and results that we hardly can follow in terms of pace. And so we gradually de-skill ourselves. And so if what makes us human is the ability to intus legere, intelligence, so reading inside things and being situationally aware, this is a key risk. The moment we have whatever, AlphaFold that tells us how the 3D folding of proteins work, but it doesn't tell us how it reached the result, we are already distancing ourselves from the solutions that we increasingly will use. The second is the interactive effects, how to apportion liability, how to foresee at the moment of design and deployment of the system, how the AI system would interact not only with the external environment, but with other AI systems. This makes it very, almost a Herculean task to understand how risk will evolve over time. And it's very important that we keep in mind that whatever we're discussing here in terms of impact assessment, and I close, of course, otherwise Tom will start throwing stuff at me, rightly so. The real problem that we will see over time is that what you do ex ante in an impact assessment, you're going to have to redo periodically, and you have to redo periodically by enabling this to be a learning cycle. You have to learn over time how your learning system is learning and evolving, and what are the impacts that it's creating on the market and on society out there. That's important because I don't think we can reason on impact assessment by thinking that they're going to be a one-off exercise.
That's wonderful. Yes, taking us right back to the policy-making cycle that we talked about right at the beginning. Mindful of time, I suggest we perhaps go straight to questions. I think we have a microphone down on the side here. I can see a hand just over on the left. The gentleman in the glasses, I was thinking.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much. Sophie from the Brussels Privacy Hub. I have a very quick question. I was wondering whether you could tell us anything on the ISO standard 42005 that was just finalized. Thank you.
Charlotte,
yes,
is that one that you can help with? Yes, thank you.
So yeah, there was a lot of work at ISO trying to make, so we were talking about, Andrea was talking precisely about the difficulty to make horizontal standards. So this is an attempt to do something sufficiently broad and sufficiently international also, because ISO is not supposed to, in the fact, it's not really true, but is not supposed to care about European legislation. So this is a very good basis for the work we're doing at the Senelec right now to write standards. This is some of the inspirations. Also, there is a lot of flexibility in such standards, like the 42001 for AA systems. Such standards are really suitable to information systems. Of course, they're made to, but they need some adjustments, some specificities, and also a bit maybe enforcement regarding the requirement of the European Commission. So we are taking these standards as great paradigms and models. And this is one of the questions, actually, that we are going to inherit from, or not, from this kind of a new tradition to make some management norms, management standards. But they're not the complete answer to the European Commission. They won't be. Probably, actually, I'm not the only one in the game here, but they probably will be adjusted, they will be precise, and also there is sectorial articulation that is needed here too.
Thank you very much. And I think we had another question. Yes,
Hello.
lined up already. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this panel. It was very interesting. I had a question because, actually, you mentioned that you assessed, a facial recognition system for the Parisian transportation.
Actually, not facial recognition. It was precisely the objective to not allow
Okay, so it was
facial
a CCTV
recognition.
system?
It was actually the purpose we allowed in this case were not these kind of systems.
Okay.
There were. Sorry, maybe you want to finish your question.
Yeah, because it is. We can elaborate on it anyway. Because so yesterday there was a panel on facial recognition with researchers demonstrating that actually these tools is never. We never proved that they were efficient, never proved their efficiency for eliminating crime, for example, or making arrests. So if you had to, assess such a system, and you mentioned that we have to have a holistic approach, do you think that the efficiency of the already existing systems in other countries, for example, should be assessed, and would this kind of system fail the proportionality test?
So for now, under GDPR, we do not acknowledge such systems, and so we were really we paid particular attention that the suppliers, at least the one we kind of pre-audited, did not use this technology. This is in the law, actually, the Olympic Game law. So to respect the law, they had to not use this technology and to do not use biometric identification either. So to answer the question of proportionality, it is true that the AI Act broadens and would maybe allow in certain contexts very specific link to security some uses. As we are going to be the competent authority on this question, I think we are going, of course, to keep our GDPR tradition to be specifically attentive to the fact that there is individual threats for freedoms of individuals here. That is not to deny. There is also, there may be in certain extent democracy threatens. So to answer the question, of course we are going to strike the balance for these cases too. But these are very sensitive, and the CNIL has a tradition to be really aware and to be very sensitive to this question when it comes to facial recognition, also because it entails particularly some risk for discrimination, equity, etc. So we will use this power of data protection authorities for biometric and mass surveillance very carefully.
Thank you. We can perhaps squeeze in one more on the front here.
Hi, my name is Mark. I'm a cybersecurity expert, but I want to have a question for Sabri and Andrea. Impact assessment for AI, viewing the fact that AI systems evolve very rapidly, agile is used as development technology. What would you recommend to companies in practice to do an impact assessment that kind of is reality, but still holds water while the AI systems move along at the speed of light?
That's an excellent question, because by definition, if you put matrix, you need gating, and gating is against agile. So that means that somehow you need to find a balance between what kind of things you as an enterprise, you decide to check when, And that's why, for my customer, some of them has decided to use a typical waterfall software development lifecycle for the AI model for the high risk. But for the non-high risk, they still use some kind of matrix, but without any gating. They have just one final gate without going in production. So there is some trade-off like this that organizations need to adapt.
Briefly, Andrea, perhaps?
Yeah, very quickly. Assessing and auditing an AI system, in many cases, is like a sort of a Pantarei, everything flows exercise, right? Heraklitos, if you wish. It's impossible to dive in the same river twice. And also observing and being ensuring that this is, especially if you're a third-party auditor, ensuring that this is the real thing is very complicated. This is where very often all the assessments and the audits and the standards, for the question that was asked before, also on the ISO standard that was just approved, tend to be process or organizational standards rather than more technical standards, because what you are checking in non-technical terms is that the system has what it takes to adapt to changing circumstances. The same thing is it's difficult to say how cyber secure is an AI system. So very often what you answer is the question, is it been subject to red teaming, and is it subject to red teaming on a periodic basis? So does the organization carry out these exercises on a periodic basis? And this, I think, one of the things that we will discover over time, that what we call standards are actually process and organizational issues rather than technical safeguards.
Excellent, thank you. And just to round things off, I'd like to invite our panelists to just wrap up their message, perhaps for you in a sentence, please, or two. Axel, perhaps from a civil society perspective first, you could.
Yeah, okay. Test, okay. I will just end the way I started it, so the implication of the younger generation into those type of conversations, because it will allow for a more equitable and more efficient way of pushing the boundaries into creative and innovative way of challenging AI regulation.
Thank you. And Charlotte, from the regulator's point of view?
Thank you. What I would stress is the fact that as a regulator, we have a lot of experience actually since our creation almost. And notably, we have experience of impact analysis from the GDPR. And we are going to use this experience to the benefits of stakeholders, not only because it's the most complete that exists right now, but also because it's relevant. It is broad, it is holistic in some extent, and we are going to put this experience at the supplier's disposal in multiple arrangements, such as sandboxes, for example.
And thrown to Andrea for the more academic, perhaps, viewpoint.
Well, the good news is that there's going to be many more CPDPs about AI and the AI Act, because the implementation has just started. So for the regulators, Charlotte, please continue to engage in providing interpretive guidance and in cooperating with other types of regulators. I mean, the UK is a good example with the Digital Regulatory Cooperation Forum. Other countries in Europe are trying to get their act together, because we need a multidisciplinary approach. And as just to anticipate what you will say, hopefully not burning it, we also need a multi-stakeholder approach, meaning we need civil society and academia to keep an eye on what's going on. And for this, we need transparency and fully auditable AI systems. So this is, if you wish, a public discourse that has to start fully now. And all of us have to pretend that it starts, because otherwise it will happen really behind closed doors.
Excellent. And finally, Sabri, from a business point of view.
Yeah, recently I've seen thousands of generative AI applications deployed in production. And even though these applications are falling outside of the high-risk category, they were deployed without adequate understanding of the model performance, fairness, explainability, you name it. This can have catastrophic impact for the business. And I would like to raise the awareness of the market about the lack of AI governance, even for non-high-risk models.
Thank you very much. So all that now remains is for me to thank all of you, our audience, for attending our session this afternoon, and to ask you to join me in thanking our panel. Thank you very much.